is that whatever we do for making things more consumer friendly does create some burden on the editor. And so it seems like this is a, you need to do something like this if you're going to try and get to your vision of a wise document. So it's amazing just to have a working prototype to play with.
Yeah, and I was this week I was thinking and working a little bit on the glossary.
Ah.
So I was thinking I have an OmniOliner document. I don't know that there's too much to show, but I started with the language glossary, and to adapt it to my view of things. That the capitalization thing, I don't use that. I undefine one word, act, because it's the glossary is the center of the whole language thing, right? That's where you define what actions and events and not talk, like doing abbreviations and absolute specification, and then we have things like specification and process. So I know that Tom has worked on this a long time, but my vision is to have for the glossary to serve as a foundation for not just planning, but everything, when it comes to language. And I also think like a niche in the sense that we have to automate things, and if we envision to automate things so that machines understand us and we understand machines, we should have a common language or something close to that, so that we write a document for everybody to read and understand, but a machine should also be able to understand that. So that means to understand that document, that means terminology should be defined, but in scopes, right? The scope of our thing would be, I don't know, that Datocracy, I guess, but not the values, but the workings. How does this work? How do you record events and things? All those, those mechanisms. That is, I think, is the foundation for talking about policies and principles and values. So we have to have that, and specific definitions of terms like what Tom has come up with are fundamental. But we should I think we should use dictionary definitions as a starting point, and then change them only when strictly necessary, and then have the define scopes, like this is the foundation that language scope or something like that, and then above that we will have some dictionary, American Heritage or whatever. So we say, okay, the dictionary definition of this word is that is changed here because blah, because this environment that we're defining needs to use this particular thing that the term is describing, and we gotta stay with the English definition, but we might change it a bit just to make it easier for everybody to understand.
Right. I think one thing I've discovered is I went through this in my previous, I guess, recording, was the dictionary definition is not actually helpful, because what's happening is that people have an emotional state that we're trying to capture. And what matters in a conversation, at least the dialogue, is what do people feel like that word means? And even if it's, and the other thing is that dictionaries have, a whole range of definitions for a word. And so just saying it's what's in the dictionary, I was like, well, do you mean, type 1, type 2, type 3? And so the, it's kind of, language definition becomes it can become a power play unless you just say, hey, this is what I meant by this word. It's okay, well, that's not what I mean by this word. It's like, okay, do we, use a different word? Do I persuade you to accept mine? Appealing to authority, like going to a dictionary, is it's almost kind of a last resort if you're not able to resolve a problem socially.
Well, yeah, I meant to, okay, maybe we don't say, oh, the dictionary says this, but we're going to change it. So I get, yeah, but as the writer of those terms, you should know the definition. You should.
Well, you should know how you mean those words, and
yeah.
and then I think right, like I think this is one of the problems in communication in general and in culture in general. We have to assume that some words mean something that we all agree, but then the interesting conversations to me are where we find a word that doesn't quite capture either what I mean or what you hear. And whenever that happens, that's when we have to have, I think I'm a little bit more pessimistic than you are in that I don't think we can ever completely define anything except by example. But and hello, Tom, glad you could join us. I wasn't sure if you were still able to stay up this late and join us, but I appreciate your making the attempt. And, like always, we have to sort of assume default cultural connotations for words to even communicate at all, right? Otherwise, we'd be speaking French or Polish or, Russian to each other, and it wouldn't accomplish anything. But usually where I find that people have conflict or misunderstandings, it's precisely where the default cultural understanding and vagueness of the words breaks down for the purposes that we're trying to accomplish. And that's precisely where we need to have these discussions. This is why I think I love the idea of having these things recorded. So it's like, this is what we were thinking and fighting about. And a good judicial opinion kind of does that. It tries to break down these words from their common everyday meaning into a term of art in the context. And these are what you're wrestling with. And this is why you meant it that way. And so I think that to me, for really important documents, you need to capture all the discussion and argument around it, not just the final words.
Okay. Okay, that creates a long definition, but I understand what you're saying.
Because you're capturing the context, right?
Yeah.
We were trying to do this and not that, and that's why we settled on this word. And similarly, when someone's reading it, they can look at the word and it says, okay, that makes sense, I can do it. And then it gets to the issue of constructivism. Are you familiar with that term?
No, it sounds Ayn Randy.
No. It's much more in the education tradition.
Okay.
Which is that, like, rather than like the Montessori method, like rather than teaching people to memorize a bunch of mathematical facts, you give them a bunch of blocks and sticks with numbers and scales on them. And then by playing with them, they understand, they build the ability to actually implement mathematical concepts by building with it and working with it. And this is kind of a long way to get back to Tom and our discussion, we started discussing Val plan and how it fits in with Ernest's vision. I think the interesting thing to me that I was trying to do with this first draft is define datocracy by trying to do it and failing, and then iterating with both of you to see if we could actually build this thing that we're thinking about and agree on a set of words and terms around it. And to me, that whole process, our stumbling through and reaching an agreement and seeing this doesn't work, that to me is actually the real, that is what datocracy really is that process. And the document is just kind of a way to summarize the result and give people a starting point for their own efforts to do so. Anyway.
So oh yeah, that's the problem. Like I was just talking about the glossary, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about something even, ahead of that. Not ahead,
Well, I think the answer is that like there's a relationship between the two.
Yeah, but then what terms do we use to do the work that defines the glossary? You're saying let's try to do it, but we have to have some words to talk about it. So as we are working, we are defining these words. It's like a
I think that's kind of, I mean, that's what I understand.
Can I intervene there about
Please
words?
do.
I built a 700-800 word glossary for my planning language. So
yeah, I'm going through that.
I discovered the following, that if you focus on words, you're going to get in trouble. That's why I call it a concept glossary. So what I found I could do and get away with was define a concept very clearly. And then I put a word on it, like democracy, and I say, that's my word. And when I use that word, this is what I mean. You are free to use synonyms for it, like free thought. I couldn't care less. And I'll take note when you say free thought, you're pointing to my concept that I've defined. In other words, we cannot impose our words on other people. They will refuse it. They will get problems because of their culture. What we can do is define something pretty clearly, say what word or even synonyms, which I often do, we're going to use USA, United States of America, right? And say, I don't care what synonym you use, as long as it goes into that one concept, so we know what we're talking about. Anyway, that's where I am. Don't get hung up on the word. Allow synonyms. Allow people to know that when you say a certain word, irrespective of what they thought that word means, then you are talking about that definition. The other thing, Ernest, is that, we do a lot of definition as we move along. For example, take a very simple example. If I say a sentence and somebody says, what do you mean by democracy? I don't answer them. If I haven't already defined it and can't point to it, I say, right here, right now, we're going to write that word democracy and we're going to define it. And maybe we can even agree on the definition. Okay, in other words, we do it on the fly as needed, as people feel the need to have a definition. Anyway, that's sort of my world of terminology.
Yeah, and I understand, and I appreciate that you put numbers in those words, so that.
Well, be careful. I wouldn't say that. I take some words like qualities and values, and I define them with the help of numbers.
But okay, the numbers are used to, like ID, so that some translator can change that, or is that the purpose?
No, the main purpose of me quantifying values and qualities is clear communication. In other words, if I say I want very high security, nobody knows how high that is. But if I say I want 95% chance of catching a hacker, that 95 is a very clear idea. It's not 93 and it's not 94, and you can measure whether out of 100 hackers you caught 95.
Yeah,
So
but I'm not talking about the usage. I'm talking about the glossary definitions. Your language.
Okay, in
it
my
has-
glossary definitions, I use very few numbers at all.
No. But I mean, every single term
Oh.
has a asterisk. number.
Sorry, I think I misunderstood you a little bit, and I apologize. I have numbered all my concepts with an asterisk and then 3 digits.
Mhm.
And that's to give it a completely word neutral identity. Okay, like aim is asterisk 001.
Mhm.
And yeah, so that allows me to refer to my term without using any word in any language whatsoever. And that's a convenience, and it gives a very, very unique meaning to it. It also gives the a simple opportunity for translating into different languages by
Mhm.
just attaching, say, a French word to the number, and then it automatically gets you into the definition.
And that's good because not only us would be able to do that. Anybody, somebody that's writing another document that's mentioning this one should be able to do the exact same thing. Define a term, and in that scope, so that the scope is different. And the same thing. This is the word that I define because of whatever reason, and so that people and machines can be certain that they are working with the concept regardless, despite the word. So the concept is this, and
Yeah,
it's concept as an ID, and
it's the definition of the concept that counts.
Yeah.
The word is what I just call a pointer, well-known term to programming culture. It's just a pointer to the definition. And by the way, the moment you do that, you realize that things like pictures and icons can also be pointers to a concept. You're not limited to words or numbers.
yeah, it sounds like aliases rather than. Well, I guess
No, that's a good word. I
Yeah.
used the word synonyms a moment ago, and alias is synonyms. I think that's almost identical. Yeah, I use any aliases that are useful. That is, so some people find it very useful to shorten things and have acronyms and abbreviations. So let them do it. Doesn't matter that I use 3 full words in my original definition. I said United States of America, and they want to use USA. Doesn't matter as long as that still points to the same thing, and we agree that we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah. Mhm. Okay.
In the Datocracy book, I have, of course, defined quite a lot of terms that I've never defined before that relate to Datocracy. So that's in the back of the Datocracy book.
Yeah, and they're not part of the glossary.
They are not part of my planning language glossary.
But they're in the book glossary or another section that is not the glossary.
They are. The Datocracy is quite new. Remember, I only did it in June of this year, June and July. So I did it as a standalone work. I didn't do it to. I used my planning language ideas to express some ideas about Datocracy. Okay, but I didn't really worry too much about merging the terminology, which could be done, but I didn't see any point in it.
Okay, well, that's what I'm going through. I'm actually going through the website. So you have a website with all those with a lot of those definitions. You said that it's a superset.
Yeah.
So I'm going through that because you said that the book has a shortened version of that.
That's right. The competitive engineering book has a abbreviated version of the full language glossary. Right.
Okay. So at this point, I'm going through the not the book, but in the website.
Right.
So that I get them all. Because Ernie and I were talking about why am I doing this? And I'm doing that because just like you did, trying to help us communicate. So
Right.
I'm trying to create a language, a simple language that anybody can understand, including machines. And this language would, it could be a little specialized, but not too much, so that somebody writes a document and a machine can understand it for the most part. Right? At least when it comes to definitions and things, it can. If this is a contract, then you can understand that and say, okay, we have now we have smart contracts on. So we, even though smart contracts can be written in several languages, Solidity, and now we have Cardano and Marlowe for financial contracts. I think is great, especially the Marlowe language, because it's very specialized. It's just financial contracts, and it's written in a way that it still seems very computer like, but it's kind of more effective at defining things. So on this date, you have to pay your insurance premium, and if it's not paid, maybe the contract is canceled, something like that. So I want to envision a way that people can even query a document to say, so ask questions so that the interpreter can process the document and answer them. That's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. So we have to have some language that everybody can understand, and by that, we need to have concepts, not words. We need to have define the concepts we're talking about and their scope, so that people can navigate all that stuff. Because I envision things, documents connected through words. So this is the term you're talking about. So can you tell me more about this? Now we have to create these links ourselves. The writer has to create those links himself. But I envision a place where the document or the document, the agent that is showing the document can do smart things with that document and with data outside of it, so that we have apps, and everything revolves about around apps. To me, everything should revolve about data. We have data, and then any kind of system can work on this data. You don't have to have a specialized app to read that, a spreadsheet or a word processor. No, anything can understand that, because as human beings, we understand everything, right? We see a spreadsheet, oh, that's a spreadsheet. We see a text document, oh, that's a document. We see a presentation. We don't need to process in our heads, oh, I need to open Keynote to understand that. No, you understand it because it's understandable. So that's the kind of thing that we should strive for, not being app-centric, but being data-centric. And being data-centric is kind of like that.
Ernest,
thing. Yeah.
You seem to be assuming a lot there. Like the first time someone sees a spreadsheet, they can often be very confused by it, right? It's not being human, it's that they have experiences.
Yeah, I'm talking about having experience. Yeah, not, but we deal with tables. So you have, you see headings and you see columns.
After you've gotten used to tables, I mean, I remember my fourth grader had to go through what is a table, what is a chart, right? And I think that's the interesting thing, is there is no primal thing that we all understand. It is precisely that we have had experiences that are hopefully similar enough that they give us useful guides. And in fact, can be quite frustrating if we think something looks like something we've experienced, but then it doesn't act that way.
Yeah. Okay.
We call that culture shock.
So imagine that somebody doesn't know what a spreadsheet is, right? But this person is looking at a document, and the agent reading or interpreting the document to that person knows that, oh yeah, this person doesn't know what a spreadsheet is, so I have to change the presentation of this data so that they understand it. In what way, I don't know, but if they don't, maybe it says you have to know what a table is or something like that, but that would be kind of rude. Maybe the document can be presented to those people in a way that they do understand it, you know, whatever that way is. If there's a graph, maybe the values are, you know, spoken. So, you know, 10%. Oh well, they have to understand percentages, but
Yeah,
okay.
see, that's the
Ignoring
problem,
that,
is
ignoring that.
But so, yeah, I think the earnest is that in general, the problem of understanding someone's context is unbounded, right? If you have a caveman who's speaking Proto-Indo-European, who has never seen a technology and doesn't speak your language, like you have to explain all of civilization to them, and that's not, you know, something that is trivial to encode, right?
Yeah.
That's why I think that there's a combination of a document. I guess there's three things. There's like the formal document, which is the thing that sort of specifies it in a way the machine can understand. There's the historical context of, like, you know, people can look and see these conversations where you defined it. But there's also the, let's call it the interpretive community, which I think you can't get away from. You have to be able to say, like, okay, let me find a human being who can interact with you and help you learn our language. Because really, language learning, culture learning, having experiences, you have to have that reality in order to bridge non-trivial gaps. And as a segue, that's what I actually think is the first hard problem to solve, is could the three of us build a working datocratic system that we use to define datocracy and measure it, so we have a concrete working example of what that is, and then we can iterate from there to make it explainable to somebody else. That was kind of the underlying premise of my Val plan, is that we need an example that means something. And so I kind of took a stab at it. I'm not entirely happy with it, but it sounded like it at least seemed vaguely in lines of what Tom was hoping his tool would be used for. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, this I like the idea. Get a little prototype running to demo it, even if it's just a toy.
Yeah, because I think that the way it tends to work, Ernest, in terms of, you remember this at Apple, right? Nothing sells like a sexy demo, right? And if people don't understand the technology, but it strikes them as emotional cool, like, oh, that's cool, then you can get your boss to fund it. Then you can get the design team to clean it up. But once you have that, so the idea is to create the unsexy demo first, and then we can show it to people. And if people, I think a lot of people will adopt Datocracy because they use it and it solves a problem for them, even if they don't understand any of the concepts, the general concepts. Like the people who don't have to understand, like when you use an iPhone, how much of that do you need to understand? Right. Well, you see a toddler use an iPhone, right?
Yeah, at first they just, you know, slap it with their hands, and you know, sometimes if you have an app that reacts, there's an app called Ooze or something that, you know, you tap the screen and it shines some, you know, something shiny happens. So it depends on what they're doing. If it's in a, you know, in another app, it's not going to be fun. But
and I think that's exactly how this goes from being an art project to being a movement that takes over the world. Is that we have to understand sort of the edit view in order to build this thing, all the concepts behind it. But then basically we create an app. Like we go to this community and say, hey, you seem to have a problem making this decision. Let us give you a Datocracy app, which allows you to just use a small number of affordances with language that's comfortable for your community. And then you can interact like, oh, wow, we made a much better decision, you know, much faster with much less stress. That was amazing. And then that sort of micro app of Datocracy becomes their gateway into this larger world.
I like it, Ernie. Yeah, I think you got a good thing going there.
Yeah, but first we have to build a really clunky command line app for ourselves to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this a good segue to get into the editing of the document?
Yeah, if we want to.
Let's see where I have. Go. Did that show up on your screen? Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the first thing, okay, so I think I got metric and scale a bit turned around, but so let me start with that, because that was your one edit comment there. That submission's okay. Trying to scale. So it seems like I was getting scale and meter mixed up. So how do
Yep.
we fix that?
Well, first thing is, for the moment, forget the meter.
Okay,
Because we don't need it to plan and think about what we want to do. We only need it when we're operational and we want feedback. So it comes later, right? So, for example, if you want to choose a car, you can say, I want a car that goes at least 200 miles an hour without having a speedometer. You know, you just say that's the speed I want. You can talk about that speed without having a speedometer. Later, you get in the car and you push it to its limit and say, hey, it only goes 150. This is not the car I thought I ordered. That's what the meter's for. The meters are the measuring instrument or test. So long story short, in early planning, we don't need the meter at all. We need the scale to talk about things that vary. You know, we need miles per hour to talk about the speed of the car. We need volts to talk about the voltage of the device or something like that. But so we need the scale. The scale defines a variable term.
okay. So is this, so I just copy this into the scale bucket? Or is there
for the moment, I'd almost delete it on principle, maybe double checking that you're not throwing away an idea you want elsewhere. That looks more like a scale to me. Okay.
Right. Can I copy that into scale?
So if there's a little trash button, yeah, remove, gone, meter. Yeah, we don't need it. Okay. What we need is a scale to define this larger concept. Yeah.
Okay. And
now, number, okay, Datocratic number from 1 to 10 that averages. Okay. Now notice you're talking about the survey scores returned by interested parties. That is a meter.
okay, gotcha.
So it's just 0 to 10,
Measures
and then
well
that measure how well. Now you're onto it. I think
reflected.
As I said before, I had a phase in my life where the scale and meter were confused. They were integrated into one thing. And a Swedish professor pulled me aside and said, Tom, scale is one thing and the meter is a different thing. They're related, but they're not identical. And they have different purposes.
Right. So meter, this is the initial meter is. Let me capture a comment here, since even if this isn't correct, right? The initial way to measure Datocratic is just a subjective post hoc survey of interested parties.
Correct. And sort of keep it out of the way for the moment. It won't help us think about the problem.
But it helps me because I was thinking about like how to build a fully automated entropic measure of effectiveness, and I realized that is a yak shaving problem that would take forever to implement. So it's like, okay, we could just sort of do a survey and say, hey, how are we doing? It's like, okay, that was pretty good. That gives us a crude place to start.
Yeah. Now here's the thing: you have a scale, but then the question is, so the scale allows you to put a number on it, but then the question is, did you write that scale because it was easy to think about, 1 to 10? Everybody can. Or is that the best scale you can write? Does that really reflect Datocracy? You see? And so there's something called, a quantified scale is not the point. A relevant quantified scale is the point, even if it's hard to understand and hard to measure. Okay, but we can work our way there. We have a first iteration start, and that's fine. We can then, somebody has to argue that they have a better scale that'll serve our purposes and get buy-in from everybody. Yeah,
Right.
that's a much better scale, and I'm prepared to propose better scales, but that maybe it's not our first thing on our agenda. Some scale is better than no scale. It gives you ability to vary, from bad to good and things like that.
Yeah. So here's the thing I was actually most curious about iterating on, and I wondered if like the reason for having a scale is that.
By the way, Ernie, I have a remark. I'm having difficulty hearing your sound, and I have a feeling like you aren't talking to your microphone as well as you might. Maybe, but I'm just on the. I had to put on my earphones, and I'm just on the threshold. And I remember that in our earlier meetings, I had the same problem. I was really straining to.
Okay. Testing
hear.
1, 2, 3. Is this better?
Maybe a little bit better. Yeah.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay. So I switched
That's
to
better.
my laptop microphone rather than my AirPod microphone. And so
I think that might be a difference. Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
And I went away from my daughter making noise, so we have a chance. All right. So the reason I thought this was interesting to me is that really what I want to focus on, which I think is actually the meaty part of this, is this thing I'm calling Datocratic Principles.
Right.
And this feels like a big enough deal. I wonder is there to be a separate ambition or something? Because right now it's like cramming a whole bunch of stuff in one line. Is there because I feel like if we could actually articulate and agree on a statement of Datocratic principles, that would be a really useful starting point.
Okay. Now
And I
I'm
don't know if
pretty
doing it here
sure
is the best way to
I'm
do it.
pretty sure I have a set of Datocratic principles in my book now. I'll make you a bet.
I'd be willing to. Okay, do you have them
Yeah.
in a form
So
that you
so
can pull up easily?
one since I've already done it, we should probably review it first and say, is this satisfactory? Do we want to add or subtract? But inventing from scratch because we haven't had time to read it, probably wasting our time.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is what we independently came up with, but I think that you came up with your system. I mean, do you have that in an online form you can pull up right now?
Yeah. Let's see. It's in my Datocracy book manuscript, so I need to pull that up from somewhere somehow. Let's see. I want to. There we go. The exit full screen. Okay. Let me just get a copy of Datocracy.
Yeah. I think the one thing that what I remember from before, and maybe I missed it last time, was that, and this is sort of a context difference, is that what I remember you were talking about Datocracy as like, these are the ways that a political entity governing a group of citizens should make decisions, which is interesting and certainly part of the end goal, but not necessarily relevant for three of us trying to decide on a committee.
Right.
And so mine are perhaps a bit more abstract than I remember yours being, but I could be wrong.
Right. Okay, I looked it up. I got several different sets of principles. Let me just, yeah, Datocracy Principles 2.2.
Can you share your screen or?
Yeah, I think I'll share my screen. See, we are in Zoom, right?
Yep.
And share screen and Datocracy Principles. Okay, and you'll notice there are three other sets which are more specialized, but that's fine. And so there you go. I've got 10 principles of Datocracy in itself. Let's look at one or two just to get a feel of them, okay? The will of the empowered stakeholder, the Datocrat, should be the primary power for change and improvement. For example, not a political party, not a politician. It is the empowered stakeholder called the Datocrat. And then the second principle says something more about that will. It will be expressed as, it should be as their highest will of the stakeholder will be expressed. Okay, there's a little typo there. as their highest level of concern, their values. Okay, I wonder if I'm just looking at a PDF version, but I'll make a note and correct that in the master.
Editable version.
Let's see, typo 2.2 at there. Okay. Okay. So in other words, their values is, they're going to adjust their values to indicate what their highest concerns are, you know, like democracy or freedom or long-term climate change or something like that. You know, they'll, if you like, they'll put a number from 1 to 10 on each one of these values. Okay. And then the third principle is the Datocrat, if you like, the voter, will be given the opportunity to get all useful insights into the consequences of their personal value specifications. In other words, in a sense, they can have a trial vote. They say, if you don't change anything, this is what your vote's going to go for. It's going to say yes to this proposition or no. And they might say, well, that's outrageous. I didn't intend that. And they can go back and see, trace exactly why it happened, and it may be vote differently or adjust their values. Yeah. And let's see, trying to get rid of your pictures and get this. Okay. I think if I hide the sidebar, that helps a little bit, and move the whole thing. There we go. Get your pictures in. The data cancel power. The Datocrat will be enabled to reject any power action directly, indirectly, clearly, and easily. In other words, the system is going to just take over power and do it. But if they don't like what happens, they can reject it, like undo their vote. It's like almost like an undo.
Right, there's a revocable proxy is what we talked about.
Yeah, but that's the principle that your vote is, today we put our vote in there, that's it, man. You have voted for that party and that's the end of it. There's no pull it out of the ballot box and regret because you found corrupt politicians there. Okay, so this is an undo facility. The direct support, let's see, they can sort of ignore their value set and just decide to vote for a proposition, if you like, directly, and say, forget everything. I just want to vote for that allocation or that law. End of discussion. So they can override. Their values are a general set used for general decision making, but they have the power to override it to get exactly what they want. Okay, and then the auto help thing says that the Datocrat has the right to specify a whole set of stuff that will help them do the voting. For example, the degree to which the voting will be automated, the degree to which there will be default decisions, like if it's a simple example, default decision, if it's 1 hour until the voting closes, vote anyway, even if I haven't had time to look at it. It's a little box you tick. You say, that's okay with me, or don't vote. Okay. Manual decisions, that's the one just above there. Exceptions, if you're voting about children in school, no automatic voting, I want to look at it. That's an exception. And warnings, do you realize that your power settings are contrary to the manual votes you've made? In this case, there's a conflict and you ought to examine it. That would be a warning. And the idea is that if everything's running smoothly, the system will just vote for them. But there's all kinds of ways of regaining power as long as you're willing to take the time and make the decisions. Okay, so it's a form of empowerment. And here's we have the idea of the secret ballot. Well, here's something very similar. Other humans cannot demand to know about the values or actions of an individual Democrat, secret decision making. equivalent to secret vote, really. Okay, confidentiality, they can share their decisions possibly anonymously with selected advisors who must retain confidentiality of the source to discuss an issue, for example. Okay, the equivalent to this is giving information to lawyers or journalists who, or doctors who retain confidentiality. That's the equivalent idea. And finally, security. The Datocracy system will be continuously designed to resist any attempts to corrupt it in any way. So that's a basic security. Anyway, so that's, Datocracy principles. And then I have some principles, 3 sets of principles later in the book, which we won't look at now. But there's like one for prioritization. How do you prioritize things? A set of principles for that. I'm actually a principles guy. I'm kind of nutty on it. I wrote a book, Principles of Software Engineering Management, 1988, and it has 144 stated principles in there. And everything I do has that nature, including the Datocracy. There's a saying by a guy called R.W. Emerson. He says, methods are many, but principles are few. And the man who understands principles can more easily choose sane methods, in this case, Datocracy methods. So the principle has a lot of leverage in general usage. Anyway, that's me on principles. So, so I do think you should review the principles I have before you reinvent the wheel. And,
right. So I think the interesting thing for me, it really feels like your principles are what I would call sort of user requirements. These are the benefits and features we are providing to the users.
They are that, but they're also the principles of democracy. They're also the principles of Datocracy. The principle is the system has to work this way. But the fact that it works that way, of course, is indeed, it's a benefit we are providing to the user. No doubt.
Right. Well, yeah, I think the thing that is the mental frame shift that I'm trying to juggle is that it feels like if I was trying to literally implement these principles for the 3 of us, it would get very clunky.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, here I'm looking at the larger system, and we're now trying to scale down to a simple demo sexy system. That's fine. And so you can I don't care if you intentionally ignore an awful lot of what I've written to find that simple, sexy demo. That's fine. And we just announced that to everybody. This is not the full-blown system. By the way, the moment you have a simple system like that, I promise you, people will get at you like my wife does on this and say, what about that? What about that? What about that? And they say, well, we've actually answered that in the larger thing, but this is just a simple demo. So, don't attack us for not implementing all of our ideas. We didn't want to. We wanted to keep it simple for you.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. So there's a right. So there's a picture of the future. Okay. Let me maybe I can share my screen now because let me see if I can. I sort of translated your.
So I stop share.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. And then let me just try this and see if this works. This is the. Can you see that okay? I'm not sure how that shows up on your screen.
Looks good to me.
Right, so this was kind of the way I summarized your principles using my syntax. See if that feels plausible to you.
Yeah, I don't see, I scanned it and I don't see any big problem with it. I don't pretend it's complete. Maybe you don't either. But there's nothing there that strikes me as ridiculous, misunderstood, or anything like that.
Yeah.
So that, in other words, good enough to roll with to get something done.
That's good. And so, sure, go ahead, Ernest.
So you say system properties, but the 4 things that you list are behaviors. They're not properties.
Now we're playing with words.
Well,
now we're playing with words. So we haven't defined and agreed on the definition of a property.
Yeah, like system properties, like it's like specs. The iPhone 13 has 120 megahertz screen. It doesn't say it's smooth or whatever, it just says it has a 120 hertz display. It doesn't say it behaves this way or you will enjoy it.
Ernest, I remind you, we have not defined properties and agreed on it. And I
Oh.
bet you we have 3 different definitions if we were to write them down.
Mm.
Okay.
So yeah, and this
So-
is actually a good practice, right, Ernest? Is that
Yeah.
like, you're using this word, that doesn't mean what I meant, you're wrong. It's like, well,
Yeah.
no,
No.
chill. Let's just see
No,
what the
but
concept
by the way,
is.
let me just try it out. Ernest, could you think of a word instead of properties that you would feel properly described the 4 things below it?
These are the way that you should use the system.
Okay, so ways of using the system, okay?
Or another one is the system will help you do these things.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly less academic and more direct, and that doesn't hurt at all. Okay, something like that. By the way, there are synonyms, as you know, to properties like attributes and characteristics and qualities.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're all essentially the same in practice. It's what you do in 1 to 4 that counts. So
Yeah, it's
Right,
like
so-
saying an officer has to have valor and this has to have valor, right? That's a
Right.
property. Then a behavior is an officer has to leave the battlefield after all his subordinates have left. That's a behavior. So it's part of what valor is, but you see a difference. You have to have valor, but it doesn't describe what that is. Just
Anyway, I think we're getting a bit off.
yeah.
And like, I apologize if the quick header I threw in there confused the issue. Let me start with the substantive points. This is what I had previously called Datocratic Principles, but I didn't want to claim that word for my set because he'd already used that word over there. So I was trying to just kind of create some space between like the user experience, if I can use that bucket for his thing, and this thing here. And this is kind of where I was saying is that like one, and this is where it gets meter and scale kind of, actually probably this is a meter question. I'm trying to think about, I want to measure how datocratic we are in as lightweight a mechanism as possible, so we can do it informally quickly rather than waiting for 2 weeks to build a complicated app. And so the thought was, well, what are the things we care about? And can we rate ourselves on how well we're doing against those terms? So that was where I came up with these 4 as sort of an abstraction as the thing. I said, these feel like things that I could frame a question around that we could measure ourselves against. That's the thing that I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so I think
probably something like the standard user experience survey.
right.
A few questions, maybe on 1 page,
least
maybe
like
just
it's-
one. Did you feel that your concerns were taken into consideration on a scale of 1 to 10? And we're all done. That's the simplest possible feedback you could get.
Mm.
Yeah, because if they're going to put their values in there and they're going to see the decisions made by the system, they could be, and then we could say, if they feel, wow, that was really good at making decisions, then that's good. But if it said like, I felt there was a complete disconnect between what I said were my values and the decision made, then we are at a low score. We're not datocratic.
Right. So let's actually play with this this phrasing here, because I think this is good if we can agree on this sentence. I reframed it slightly here. Did you feel your decision? And this is like the simplest possible thing. It's like a yes/no question, which is like a single bit, right?
Yeah.
So that's the simplest.
Well, if we have a single instance, we've set it up with their values, and then we have a set of decisions. Could be 4 things on a screen, and the computer picks one, right? And then they're asked a very simple question: is that what your values really amount to? That choice? Yes, no. That's we are looking at the simplest possible system here.
Right. Well, I think there's two different things there, and I'm not sure which one you said. So let me try and be more precise.
Okay.
One is that, do I feel like the decision that was made agreed with my values? And the other is, did you feel like my values were taken into account when the decision was made?
Okay, I intended those things to be approximately the same thing.
Yeah, with my kids, they're rarely the same because
we'll work it out.
Right, but like that was my meaning. Like I'm not going to
We'll
promise.
probably have to experiment with questions like that to see how people feel about them, react to them, and whether they're good questions. And that's what all market survey people have to do all the time.
Right. So, but there's also like a question of, Ernest and I have talked about this before. I'm not sure if we resolved it. Is that I'm willing to say I can design a system where the process will be fair, transparent, and inclusive. I am not willing to try to design a system where I'm going to promise that the results will always be to your liking.
No,
because sometimes you lose.
Right.
You know, that's where I feel like there's
now, for example, on each of, say, 4 decisions on a screen, the scoring for each of our, whether it's 4 or 10 values, the scoring can be visible or even graphical, like a bar chart and cumulative. And so you can sort of see how your values ended up choosing this. This is what we do in a thing called an impact estimation table, chapter 10 of the competitive engineering book. We literally score multiple values simultaneously in doing design or architecture work. And I'd be happy to walk you guys through that when you're ready for it, or you can read it.
But that's really showing that like my values had an impact on the decision.
Yeah. But by the way, I should add, the impact estimation table I'm referring to, which I've been doing for about 50 years, is if you like, it's the prototype idea behind my Datocracy, quite literally. That is because I have a deep understanding how that table works. I can envisage using it for a Datocratic process. Yeah. So at some point, if you'd like to either read up on the impact estimation table or get me to present it to you, be pleased to do so.
I mean, it seems like a brilliant thing that I think I intuitively grasp what you mean. So I don't think I need an example yet, but we may need to refine that later.
I have a feeling you do grasp what I mean. Yeah. Intuitively. Yeah.
So the interesting thing to me about this question is it feels like it captures the front end of what I'm concerned about, but the other 2 points that I thought was, point 3 was the one that you really hammered into me during our first conversation, that like you want to reduce everything to an numerical value that can be measured. And
now in that case, I'm initially and mainly referring to the values. The values need numbers on them.
The inputs.
The values, your value for the future of children and education and climate and peace.
Right, like in this like larger social context.
Yeah, but your values, you cannot just say I want peace. In a sense, you have to put a numeric value on peace. I'm actually working on such things right now in practice. Peace in the Holy Land.
Right. Yeah, I noticed that. But here's the interesting thing that I think about. So let me discuss 2 different things. There's sort of the inputs on the value side, that the citizens, the Datocrats,
that's what I'm talking about.
Right. But then my understanding is that part of the purpose of the Val plan is that the decision maker, so when I on the output side, like, okay, I say that if we take this decision, I'll be really concrete. I'm saying that if we can build this system and try it out, then we will have a concrete demo that we can show people.
Yeah.
And it feels like for that output to be Datocratic, I should say, well, I will have like some way of measuring that within like 3 months, we will have a tool we can use to create a micro app for, I'm thinking, I feel like there needs to be some, actually, this is the thing that I'm trying to wrestle with. is it feels like in a truly Datocratic system, it's not just that the front end was really open and transparent and inclusive. There's also a back end that tracks what happened and sees whether or not that was a good decision.
Yep.
Or whether it achieved the accepted goal. And I'm trying to figure out how do we.
And that is built into my thinking, and it is also built into the arch prototype, the impact estimation table that's in all of my books.
And here's the thing. This is where I realized my brain was misaligned, is that by definition, at the point you're asking the participants this question, you don't know what the long-term consequences. There has to be some, I guess there's a secondary question, let me feel we have a system
So
in place.
all of your values can have long-term objectives and force you to look at the long-term consequences. Okay, we can, in other words, any one value, if I set a short-term goal this year and nothing else, then I'll just rate it on what it does in the coming year. I can set a 30-year time frame for my value, and because I want to be long-term, and then it will have to ask questions like what happens in the long term with this law proposition or whatever it is. Okay, so in other words, each value can have a long-term and or a short-term expression. And that's normal and all over the place in all of my books and methods.
Right. So I realized that and this is, again, maybe I'm getting too much onto the meter of it, but to feel like we're being Datocratic, I feel like I should at least, here's the interesting design pattern I think I'm going for, and maybe this is the wrong one. Let's see. It's that, Ernest and I both worked at Apple, and were you ever part of the ANPP process, Ernest?
What did that mean?
Apple new product process where they would have like a release review and a concept review and a product review?
Not really.
It's worth mentioning because it's an interesting organizational design pattern, is that Apple had a very lightweight process, but it was very rigorous in that you would have a concept review when you wanted to get permission to invest money to seriously explore something after you sold them the unsexy demo. And then once you did the investigation, then you would have a project review where you would say, okay, this is what we're going to build, and you give them the rules. And then the next stage would be the release review. Okay, we said we'd build this. Here's what we built. We want to ship it. And the first few ones I went to seemed incredibly boring and useless because everyone just got up, said their bit. Everyone said, yeah, sure, whatever. And then you went on their way. It's like, what's the point of this? It was only after a couple of years I realized, oh, wait, that's the genius of this process. Everyone knows what the questions are, and they know they have to have one engineering, one marketing, one finance person sign off on it. So they do a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that when it's time to answer those questions, everyone's happy with the answer. And that's how Apple got away with very lightweight committees, very lightweight process. And I realized that this is the thing that I want to get, is I want to know that every time we make a decision, afterwards, we're going to ask these two questions with variations on at the end of it saying, okay, did you feel your values were taken into consideration? And do you feel we have a system in place? And like knowing that these are the two questions that are going to be asked, that will change how I make the decision or the work I do leading up to the decision. And so the question is kind of in here is, let's not even come up with a label for these. We'll just kind of go with this from here is, I feel like if I know that we're going to ask these two questions after we make a decision, then I will get at least a 2-bit sense of how Datocratic we are. And it certainly captures my 4 principles here. And I think it's consistent with the stuff down there. And the question is that, so these are the, I'll just call them the initial data, the Datocratic Questions version 0.1.
Yep. Fine.
So that feels good for me. How about you, Ernest?
So this is what happens after a decision is made.
Is
right?
that, yeah, the idea is that like the absolute brain deadest, most simple way that we can measure our values is to say, hey, like, okay, and I'll be real precise here. I am proposing that we adopt this process for the three of us, that at the end of every decision, we ask these two questions and see if, and then, we judge how Datocratic the decision was based on how we answered those two questions.
Now, to answer these questions, you have to, well, you want the answers to be yes, right?
I want to, at one level, I want them to be yes, but even more importantly, if they're no, that's a useful, like, for example, if say the decision is that we're going to use these as our questions, I would feel like on question, let's go 1 or 2, because I think, let's call this DQ1 and DQ2. Get some nice unique identifiers on them. I would actually answer DQ1 as yes and DQ2 as no. But hey, a failing unit test is still a good place to start.
Yep.
Okay, now,
but the question is, are these the right questions to ask? And in particular for you, do you feel like the value we've talked about Datocracy, do you feel like they're captured in these questions, or are we actually missing something important?
well, to answer question 1, I have to know what my values are. I have to list them somewhere, and I have, that's the only way that I can answer that objectively. Yes, I can go through my values, and then maybe in some sense you have to know my values so that you can try to answer yes, right? Mm-hmm. Or will you just operate according to your values and then ask me whether the results that you got match my values, and then if they don't, then somebody have to change their values, or I don't know what's the action after if there are conflicts. The answer is no.
Right. So I think this is interesting. So like this is my attempt to summarize what I think are the essential aspects of Datocracy based on the long conversations you and I have had over many podcasts. Mm-hmm. And I could be right, and I could be wrong, and maybe this is a good cliffhanger to end our episode on, is to just have this out there as a not yet made or a pseudo decision. Mm-hmm. And then you take the homework to like reflect on your values and see, does this actually reflect them? Or if not, where does it fall short?
Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, because maybe the values there are some values that will be irrelevant, right? Because, well, I don't know what the decision is. This is like a template to operate.
Actually, let's go. So these are the questions, and then this is the, let's put this out there because this is worth, let's call this, this is that proposal is to use these Datocratic questions to evaluate all the decisions we make as a Datocratic committee. So this is sort of like the bootstrapping decision. We're going to make this decision about how we're going to evaluate future decisions, including this one.
Okay. Are you going to share this document with us?
Yeah, somehow? Absolutely. I will email it to you and post it on with the YouTube video.
Okay. I already have captured a screenshot of it for safety's sake. Trust no one. Get data while you can. By the way, I'm going to email to you both a simple prototype of approximately what we're trying to do that some friends of mine have done. And it's called Manage a Lens. And you can go and peek at it and play with it and talk to the people who've done it. So there we go. And ERN. Mr. Bruce. Okay, just it's called Manager Lens.
What does it do?
It does the impact estimation table, but in an extremely simple way.
Ooh,
So it's so it is a simplified. It might, but it's not intended as a prototype. It's intended as a just a simple
Working
tool
tool.
for managers. But you might like to take a look at it to get a feel for a simple way of implementing this kind of thing. These are some of my very good professional friends who love my methods, but they're desperate to try to simplify them.
yes. All right, that was a very productive session. I feel like we were close to making a decision about how to make decisions. And I actually don't even care whether people like these questions or not. I'm actually hoping that Ernest will identify something profound that's bugging him that we can talk about next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I remind you that if you haven't simply taken the time to read something I've written about impact estimation tables, I'm willing to walk you through it. And what I've discovered is that until I walk my friends through it, they don't get it. They don't even realize it's out there. I don't know why. You think that reading about it would be sufficient, but somehow it isn't. So I'm looking for, I offer you when you're ready to walk you through it. But if you say, hey, Tom, I read chapter 10 of competitive engineering, I've got it all down, I don't need any briefing, that's okay too. It's great.
The other thing that's nice, Tom, is you've been around long enough. There are people who have taken it upon themselves to write simplified summaries of your concepts. So I'm going to read somebody's cliff notes first and see how I feel about that.
Yeah, okay.
We'll link that in the show notes.
Okay, I just got an email today from a friend that I was together with in San Diego with the US Navy when 9/11 struck.
Oh, wow.
And but just for fun, I'm going to read what she says. Her name is Lois Yu. Hi, Tom. Trust you're still active and healthy. This is 21 years ago we met. Your legacy lives on with all the people you trained. This was US Navy people. Agile and DevOps are huge now. You were a pioneer in systems and software planning and project management and requirements capture and analysis. I still use what you taught me today. How are you doing?
Oh,
That's today's email.
oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right.
But
so any final
that's how
comments?
I know. That's how I know I'm not wasting my time training people.
No, of course not. Yeah. No,
That's awesome.
it's super valuable.
All right. Any final comments before we call it a?
No, if
Okay.
we could organize the startup better, so I knew who was sending me a Zoom link or not, because I was very confused this time and tried everything in
That's weird.
desperation.
So some of my calendar invites aren't coming to you properly. I don't know why, but I guess I will just send you the Zoom link 15 minutes ahead of time. That would probably solve
Probably
the
does
problem.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, next week. That was the question. Next week, do you want to go back to the 9 a.m.
Yeah.
slot?
Probably good. It was just James Bond today,
Gotta
so-
make room for James Bond.
Oh,
Yeah, so we did that today, and 3 of my 4 sons, father and son kind of thing, which is kind of fun after COVID. Can we tell you?
Yeah.
But
Next week. Oh, next week. Next week.
is that Friday the 8th?
Friday the
Okay.
8th.
I have a meeting, a 3-hour meeting until from 2:30 to 5:30 my time. Otherwise, everything free that day.
Okay, what does that even mean? Our time. Sorry, I don't know what exactly. What
Yeah,
time
well,
zone you're in.
I didn't take a chance on translating it, but 14 minus
What time is it?
9,
What time is it now there? Let's start with
it
that.
is 15 minutes after midnight now.
Okay, so this is 6 hours before this. So actually,
No, we're careful. You're in West Coast. We're more like 8 or 9 hours difference.
right. Yeah. Sorry, that's what I meant to say. Is that
Okay.
so it's 3 o'clock here, midnight there.
Yeah.
So
It's 9 hours difference.
Right, but the time slots you're busy was earlier. So actually, I have a coffee meeting that ends at 9. I could do 9:30 next week, which is 6 hours before now. which I think should be at the end of your time interval,
Yes,
right?
yes, that works. Let's try that.
Does that work for you next week?
I think
Ernest?
so. I will be in Florida, but I should be able to join the meeting.
Okay, so we'll be in 3 different time zones just to make it fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it'll be the same link every time, by the way. Same Zoom link.
Okay, I'll make
it's just
a
a-
note of it. I'll make a note of it. Got a post
right.
attendee. Post attendee. Okay.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. I will see you next Friday, God willing.
Yes.
Bye, Tom.
Okay.
Bye, Ernie.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.